Good morning. Today we'll discuss on another invertebrate group that is known as corals. Now, the corals belongs to the one of the most readily identifiable and most fascinating organisms found in the present day shallow water conditions, as well as these are also traced back far into the Paleozoic rock records. And in the Mesozoic time, particularly in the Indian Mesozoic rock records, corals are one of the important um, fossils found in the Indian Mesozoic rocks. Now, corals are a group of organisms that basically belongs to the phylum Cnidaria. Now, in some ancient literature, you will find that previously this phylum Cnidaria is known as phylum Coleanterata, but later with uh, enhanced scientific knowledge, nowadays the name is modified and now it is known as phylum Cnidaria. Now, the phylum Cnidaria group of organisms, they are basically multicellular organisms and they have a single body cavity. Now, the single body cavity of these multicellular organisms, they have a opening towards the top, as you can see in this picture, and this opening acts both as mouth as well as anus. So through that opening, the Cnidarians take the food and also they leave they excrete their excretors to the external environment. Now this opening or this mouth is surrounded by some tentacles, and these tentacles are act to gather some food particles, as well as within these tentacles there occurs some sac which hosts some chemicals, and these chemicals acts as a deterrent when they face any kinds of predation, when they face any kinds of attack. During this time they eject some chemicals through the sac, and these sacs occurs in these tentacles. Now the body of Cnidarians, they are typically diploblastic. That means they have uh, two layers. One is the outer ectoderm, another is the inner endoderm. Here you can see this is the endoderm, the innermost layer, and this is the enteron, that is the body cavity within the endoderm, and the outermost is the ectoderm. Now within this ectoderm and endoderm there was a uh, jelly-like gelatinous substance occurs, which is called mesoglia, and this mesoglia also contains the nerve nets. These nerve nets that is very primitive in nature, that is basically embedded in the mesoglia. Now the mesoglia, in its innermost portion there occurs the endoderm. So basically mesoglia is constrained within the gap between ectoderm and endoderm. Now the endoderm, that is often found intricately folded, like what you can see in this below picture. Here you can see the endoderm is intricately folded. Basically this entire endoderm acts as a gastrovascular mass. So this entire endoderm acts as a digestive organ. So due to this intricate folding of the endoderm, that increase its metabolic rate. So thereby uh, the organisms, the Cnidarians, their food can be better digest due to this increased surface area, due to this intricate folding of the endoderm. so their feeding becomes more efficient. Now, the larvae of the cnidarians are called planula, and most commonly, they are larvae of cnidarians. They did not like the soft sea floors. Rather, they establishes or they firmly attached through some hard substrates. Now, if we look at the life cycles of cnidarians, they basically exhibits two forms or two different life uh, patterns, and that is also called alterations of generations. The cnidarians have different type of individuals. One is known as polyp, another is known as medusa. The polyp is basically a sedentary sessile, that means sessile, they cannot move, they remains attached with some hard substrate, and they remains attached apically, and their mouth occurs in the tops, which is surrounded by some tentacles. The entire body of polyp is a cylindrical one, and this polyp, they asexually reproduce to form the medusa. In contrast to the sedentary life mode of polyp, the medusa are of free swimming mode of life. That means they can freely swim. They are planktonic in mode of life. The medusa are discoidal in shape, and the mouth is surrounded also by tentacles, but in contrast to the opening direction of mouth in the top part, in the polyp stage, in medusa stage, the mouth opens in the downward portions. Now, this free swimming medusa stage sexually reproduce polyp stage. So there is a circular path. One form, that is the sedentary sessile form, which remains attached with a hard substrate, that is known as polyp. This polyp asexually reproduce medusa, which are free swimming, and this medusa sexually reproduce to polyp. So there is a circular path through which at different times different forms of cnidarians are found to occur. Now, these two forms, the polyps and medusas, they occur at different times, and they looks somewhat little different from each other. So they are also known as temporal polymorphs. As cnidarians show these kinds of two polymorphs in their lifespan, this process or this phenomenon is known as alteration of generation. Now, if we look at all the cnidarians, the phylum Cnidaria is uh, subdivided into 5 classes: the Anthozoa, the Scyphozoa, the Staurozoa, Cubozoa, and Hydrozoa. Now, among these 5 classes, in our undergraduate syllabus, we only deals with the class Anthozoa, and uh, which basically consist of corals and sea anemones, and within these only corals is in our studied syllabus. Now, if we look at all the 5 classes of Cnidaria, we came to know that Cnidarians has a basic pattern, that is they show alterations of generations. But not all classes shows these two alterations of generations. If we look at the class Scyphozoa, that is the swimming jellyfish, in this the polyp phase is very reduced, and this class is more characterized by its medusa phase. In contrast, if we look at the Anthozoa phase, that means those of corals and sea anemones, here the medusa stage or the medusa phase is entirely gone. There is no free swimming medusa stage. The entire Anthozoa class is restricted to the polyp phase, and in this polyphase they form some hard skeleton parts through which they attached with a hard substrate. Now coming to corals, that is the class Anthozoa, within which one organism, that is corals. Now the polyps of corals, they build a hard calcareous uh, substrate that is known as coralite. This coralite have different shape and size, and they may be single and they may be colonial also. So colonial means different coralites, individual coralites are joined together and formed a colony. Uh, in most of the cases, we found that corals are colonial organisms. Many coral individuals live together and make a coral colony. You will often heard the term coral reefs. So these coral reefs are assemble of or together occurrence of lots of coral individuals. That means lots of coral hard calcareous um, substrate, that is the coralite, they are jointed together and forms a colony. Now the entire coral colony, that means connection of many coralites by which it forms a coral colony, that entire coral colony is known as coralum. If we look at the morphology of each single coral individual, that means each single coralite, each coralite begins as a low conical calcareous cup which have the animal at its apical side. So as I already told, its one side is fixed and it is a basal, it is a funnel shaped body. This portion is basically fixed, that is the basal side, and the organism, this is the hard calcareous part, that is the coralite, and in its distal parts, in its um, this portion, there the organisms or the polyp occurs, and this basal part, entire basal part, calcareous part is remains fixed in these portions. The growth of this calcareous cup starts with a basalt disc through which it attached or remains fixed with a hard substrate. Now, with growth of coralites, a number of longitudinal partition walls found to occur within the calcareous cup that is running along the length of the coralite. These longitudinal calcareous partitions are known as septa. So that is basically a hollow tube, a hollow funnel within which some longitudinal partitions, they may be numerous in number, occurs within this uh, calcareous cup. These partitions, longitudinal partitions, which growth along the length of the coralite, are known as septa. The apart from the septa, there also found to occur some horizontal partitions which occurs horizontally, that is perpendicular to the length of the coralite. They are known as tabuli. Apart from that, apart from septa and tabuli, which are the main calcareous hard parts found within the coralites, and in some types or in some cases there occurs some small fish scale like structures within the coralite, and mostly these structures occupying the space between the adjacent septa. These small scale like, here you can see small scale like calcareous projections inside the coralite are known as dissepiment. Now, these sediments occurs in a very narrow zone, and this narrow zone which holds or which consists of these sediments is often known as dissedimentarium. The distal part of the septa becomes united, forming the inner wall of the skeleton, and this wall, which formed due to fusion of the distal part of the septa, is known as theca. The interior space enclosed by the theca is called thecarium. Here you can see these are the septa, all the septas, and this distal parts becomes fused and form these inner walls. All the septa fused in these portions, in these distal portions, and form this circular inner wall. This inner wall is known as theca. At the distal end of each septum has a margin curved downwards towards the axis of corallite. Such upper edges of septa thus create a bowl-shaped depression at the distal end of the corallite over which the polyp sits. If you look at the uh, transverse or longitudinal section of a uh, corallite, you will find that within this corallite there are lots of septa. Here you can see this one is one septa, this will be another septa, in this side this will be another septa. In all these septas, their distal part, that is towards the mouth part, there the septa is becomes somewhat curved, and due to this curve there occurs, here you can see due to this curve there occurs a bowl shaped depression, and this depression is known as calyx or calyx. This is the position, that is this calyx, over which the organism, original organism, that is the polyp, occurs over this depression, over this calyx. Inside the corallite, often at the central portion, there we found a vertical solid rod-like structure which forms due to fusion of the septum. So these septums often meet at the central part. Here you can see at this central part, and at the central part there forms a longitudinal solid rod-like structure, and that rod-like structure is known as columella. Now, the septa within each corallite that occurs at different stages of their lifespan. At the earlier stage, at the juvenile stage, all the septas formed are known as prosepta. This prosepta occurs at very initial stage of the corallite, and generally they are 6 in number. Depending on their occurrence, depending on their positions, they are differently named. If we look at the transverse section of a corallite, here you can see they are differently named. C means cardinal, uh, K means another septa that occurs opposite to the cardinal septa. It is known as counter cardinal septa. At the side of the cardinal septa, there occurs two septa which are symbolized as L. This L indicates lateral septa or alar septa, ALAR. These are differently named. Similarly, at the side of counter cardinal septa, there also occurs two septa which are symbolized as capital K and L. These are known as uh, counter lateral septa, and these six septa, one cardinal septa, one counter cardinal septa, two alar septa, and two lateral counter cardinal septa. These are the six septas which forms at very early stage of the corallite. So these are known as prosepta or protosepta. After that, in the later stage of the corals, in between these prosepta, in between the void spaces of these prosepta, there occurs other smaller septas or other numerous septas. Those are known as metasepta. Now, the occurrence of these prosepta and metasepta at different numbers are highly important because these often becomes very important features to distinguish different types of corals. Here you can see a transverse section of a corallite, and here you can see the septa occurs in a radial fashion, and at the central part they fused together and form this solid rod-like structure which is known as columella. Now often it is found that some septa, that is, becomes their growth rate becomes slower compared to other septas, and due to this slowing growth rate of some septa, they formed a depression when they looks from apical side. So compared to the surrounding septa, there are some septa, here you can see this one, its growth rate becomes suddenly ceased or suddenly growth rate becomes lower. So there forms a depression, and that depression is known as fossula. Now, generally, this fossula is found to occur for two septas. One is for cardinal septa. In some corallites, it is found that the cardinal septal growth rate decreases and there occurs a depression. So, in that case, the fossula is known as cardinal fossula. In other cases, or in some other uh, corals, it was found that the growth rate decreases in the alar septas, these lateral septas, L septas. So in that case, the fossula formed due to slower growth rate of alar septa or lateral septa. The fossula is known as lateral fossula or alar fossula. Here you can see a coral colony where the successive corallites are joined together, and the skeletal material between two corallites through which they are joined together, it is known as cenostem. Here you can see a top view of a coral colony. These are the columella, solid rod-like structure. This is one entire corallite, a single corallite uh, with all its septa. You can clearly see the septas occurs in a radial fashion, and you can see a centrally cup shaped or bowl shaped depression over which the polyp occurs. This depression is known as calyx, and all the individual corallites are jointed together. This intermediate portion, which is roughly smooth compared to this calyx part, this is known as cenostem. Now, there are many classification scheme and different subdivisions are proposed to classify corals, and depending on that there are many controversies, but overall the corals are classified in a broadly three subdivisions: the rugose corals, the tabulate corals, and the scleractinia corals. These corals are classified depending on their different morphologies. The rugose corals are generally robust. They made their calcareous hard part by calcite. The rugose corals may be solitary, that means they may occur either a single corallite or they may also occur in a colonial fashions. Rugose corals have well organized septal arrangements with six primary septas, and among these six primary septa is: one is cardinal septa, one is counter cardinal, two alar septa, and two counter cardinal lateral septa. So to all these six septas are found to occur within the rugose corals, and within the uh, six primary septa. If you just draw the previous picture, this one is cardinal, this one is alar septa, occurs at the side of the cardinal. This one is counter cardinal, occurs at the opposite side of the cardinal, and this one is the counter lateral cardinal too. So these are the six prosepta, and within these prosepta, secondary septas or metaseptas are also found to occur, but all the metaseptas are found to be restricted within the four quadrants. Metasepta occurs in rugose corals in these portions between counterlateral and alar septa, between alar and cardinal septa, and in this side also. No metasepta is found to occur between the counter cardinal and counter lateral septa. Between these two prosepta, there is no metasepta occurs in case of rugose corals. So in this portion, between one counterlateral to another counterlateral consisting the counter cardinal, there is no metasepta in case of rugose corals. In rugose corals, apart from the longitudinal septas, the horizontal structures such as tabuli, discipiments are also found to occur. It was thought that rugose corals first appeared in the mid-Ordovician time, and they are particularly restricted or they becomes completely extinct in the Permian time. So these are the Paleozoic corals. Nowadays, there is no rugose corals found in nature. The second type of corals is known as tabulate corals. As the name suggests, tabulate corals have well-developed tabuli, that means the horizontal structures within the corallite. The septa are usually very much reduced or often absent. Some spine-like features are found sometimes. Disappearance are found sometimes, but they are not so prominent. The main structural features found within the coralites, that is the horizontal walls, horizontal structures, that is the tabuli. Tabulate corals, here also the main hard part composing material, skeletal material is calcite. These type of corals first appeared in the early Ordovician, and like the Lugose corals, they also suffer extinction at the end of Permian. So these are also Paleozoic forms. There is no present day relatives of tabulate corals. And the last type, which is found in the present day also, that is the Sclerectinia corals. These Sclerectinia corals first appeared in the Triassic time after the Permo-Triassic mass extinction, and till date the relatives of Sclerectinia corals are found in nature. The shell material or the skeletal material of this type of coral is made up of aragonite. Here, the Sclerectinia corals are very much porous. Uh, both solitary and colonial types are found. Uh, in Sclerectinia corals, apart from the six prosepta, metasepta are also found, and the metasepta are occurs in all the spaces within the prosepta. So as we found in the rugose corals, this portion, that is the position between two counterlateral septa, does not contain any metasepta. Only these four quadrants, this one, this one, this one, and this one, they contains the metasepta. In Sclerectinia corals, these positions also contains metasepta. So all the six quadrants contains metasepta. Uh, in this type of corals, tabuli are absent. There is no tabuli, there is no horizontal structures. Disappearance are somewhat found in a very little way. So these are the main distinguishing features, as well as uh, we also found that they have a distinct different time range. There is no overlap, and they have different occurrence. Depending on that, these three broad subdivisions of corals are done, and it is followed nowadays. Ecologically, two groups of corals, particularly the scleractinian corals, are identified in nature. The first is the hermatypic corals. Uh, these are associated with a algae that is known as zooxanthellae. That means the corals and these algae zooxanthellae are in symbiotic relationship with each other, and as they occurs in a symbiotic relationship, so they are mostly occurs within the photic zone of the water column. And these are the corals, these hermatypic corals are the main responsible corals to form the present day coral reefs. Apart from the hermatypic corals, another kind of uh, sclerotinia corals found in the present day is the ahermatypic corals. There is no symbiotic relationship with any kinds of algae or other organisms. Mostly here the corals occurs in a solitary fashion. Now, the reef corals, that is particularly the hermatypic corals, the reef is basically a biological framework with some significant topographic reliefs, because here all the coralites they joined together and form a kinds of wall-like structure, a restricted structure in which the waves and all kinds of marine water movements that are basically face some kind of obstruction. So this is a biologically produced wall-like structure formed when the coralites of coral mutually join together and form a kind of barrier. This topographic feature is known as reef. Now, there are certain conditions, certain requirements for formation of a well-developed reef. Uh, the conditions are it must have high light levels, so that uh, there should be uh, all the biological processes can be efficiently done. The water should be highly transparent. The water should not be turbid. There is not very much siliceous supply within the water. The water should be remain transparent, more or less crystal clear. The temperature of water should be above 20 degrees centigrade. Uh, Below that centigrade, reef formation is not so well developed. There should be lots of uh, good water circulation. The water circulation should be very good. The nutrient supply within the water, that means the siliceous supply, the raw ingredients, the sediment supply should be poor, such that the water remains transparent, the water remains clear, the it does not require the turbid water, and there should be hard substrate within the ocean, within the marine condition, so that the coralites can remain attached with that, because in the polyp stage of corals they require some kind of hard substrate, any kind of hard substrate to attached by their um, coralites. Now, if we look at the reef corals, reefs are the types of structures which is mainly formed in the tropical shallow water, where all the previously discussed conditions are better found, and mainly three types of reef structures are found. First is the fringing reef. Here you can see which fringes the existing land areas at the peripheral part of the land area. The land area is over the mean sea level, and at this peripheral part where the land area meets with the ocean water, at this peripheral part, at this fringe part, the growth of corals occur and the reef forms. So as these reefs occur at the fringe, at the peripheral part of the islands, at the peripheral part of the land, and they occur in a encircled way, these reefs are called fringing reef. Next type is the barrier reef. Um, these are um, somewhat remains or occur as a barrier to the open ocean, to this island. The reef acts as a restricted wall so that the open ocean does not reaches directly to the islands. So behind the wall there occurs a very shallow condition of slightly restricted ocean water, thereby forms a lagoon. And as the reefs acts and occur some distance from the main island, and they act as a barrier, so these kinds of reef occurs as a barrier reef. And lastly, the atolls. Here the coral reefs are completely surrounding a lagoons. No island mass is exposed in the middle part. All the area, the coral reefs occurs in a circular fashion, and within this circular reef portion, there occurs a depressed portion, which is must be a uh, lagoon, and this condition of formation of occurrence of coral reef is known as occur. Now, according to Darwin, these kinds of phenomenon can be seen in a temporal manner in a volcanic island. When the volcanic island first occurs uh, at the fringing part or the peripheral part of the island, there forms a fringing reef with successive weathering and erosion, and with successive subsidence of the volcanic island, it forms the reefs becomes some distant apart from the nowadays exposed islands, and thereby forms a lagoons, and now the reefs become barrier reef. And ultimately when the volcanic island is subsidence or submergence is complete, the island becomes completely submerged within the water. Now all the reefs are exposed, and within the reefs there occurs a shallow sea or a shallow lagoon. At this time it is known as atoll. So with time, with submergence, with subsidence of the volcanic island landmass, from fringing reef to barrier reef to atoll is formed. And this concept or this uh, temporal development of different kinds of reefs is proposed by Darwin. Important to the many kinds of ecological study, not only in the present day as well as for identifying many ancient ecological conditions, many ancient rocks. Coral reef is a diverse habitat. Many kinds of organisms lives not only in symbiosis, but due to the porousness of the coral reefs, that basically acts as a shelter for many different kinds of organisms. And accordingly, as they occur mostly within the photic zone, so that is a paradise for living of different kinds of organisms. Also, as it uh, requires a specialized type of conditions, so most of the organisms found in associated with coral reefs, they are particularly restricted or particularly found in that ecological condition. uh, in no other place of the world those organisms are found. So though the organisms associated with the coral reefs, they are very much restricted, they are very much endemic to that particular ecological conditions. Now corals are indicative of certain ecological conditions also, particularly the reef corals. They are highly latitude dependent. Most of the reef corals are found in the tropical and subtropical regions. They are mostly restricted within the 30° north and 30° south latitude conditions. The water transparency should be high. The water must not be very much turbid, and there should be good water circulation. So fresh water circulation should be there, but at the same time, the water should be less turbid. It should be crystal clear. It should be transparent. Temperature of formation of coral reefs should be better if it remains within 18° to 30° centigrade. Below 18° centigrade, coral reef formation is not occur in a very uh, good way. There should be a hard substrate, so rocky substrate or hard substrate is required for formation of reef, for formation of corals, because corals always need to a hard substrate to which it can attach and form its calcareous hard parts. The salinity condition, coral is strictly marine. There is no fresh water or no other counterpart of coral reported. They are strictly saline water. They are strictly shallow marine water organisms. Water depth, corals are better grow with about 30-meter depth. So although below 30-meter light can penetrate, we know that photic zone is up to 200-meter, but the best development is of corals occurs within the 30-meter depth of water column. So if we get coral reefs in ancient rock record, we can broadly, without going any kind of isotopic or any kind of other studies, we can broadly interpret that there exist definitely more or less these kinds of conditions, so that the coral reefs structures is formed in a profuse way in that time depositional condition, in that time marine condition. About corals,